Hey, hot enough for you? Right? Everybody says that. Yesterday I did one of these from a deli, and apparently that worked. So maybe that's part of what Wallpaper 4 is becoming. I've got 4 players I'm going to talk about, and I've got the wallpaper. Wherever I happen to be when it's time to talk about them, that's where I'm going to do it. Today, we got Jerry DaVanon for the Houston Astros, Jamie Langenbrunner for the St. Louis Blues, Steve Harris for the Golden State Warriors, and Nate Chandler for the Carolina Panthers. Let's start with Jerry DaVanon. DaVanon was just one of those baseball players. He kept finding another way onto a major league roster. Infielder, shortstop, second base, third base. He bounced around quite a bit before Houston gave him one of the best stretches of his career. Houston brought him up in August of 1975 after Roger Metzger got hurt. And DaVanon actually hit. He finished that season at .278. Then he came back in 1976 and hit .290 in 61 games with 20 RBI. For a guy who'd spent most of his career moving between the majors and the minors, Houston turned into probably his best opportunity. And that's something I like about doing these. Jerry DaVanon isn't one of those Astros that you immediately associate with the team history. But he was there. He contributed. For a little while there, late in his career, Houston is where things actually worked. Also, baseball families are weirdly persistent. Jerry's son, Jeff DaVanon, Jeff eventually played 8 seasons in the majors himself. So how many guys do you think we completely forget because they weren't stars? All right, hockey. Jamie Langenbrunner is almost the complete opposite situation because by the time he got to St. Louis, everybody in hockey already knew exactly who he was. This was a guy that had won 2 Stanley Cups, one with Dallas and one with New Jersey. He captained the Devils, and he was captain of the United States team that won the silver medal at the 2010 Olympics. Then in 2011, he signed with St. Louis. And I think that timing matters. The 2011-12 Blues were becoming a more serious team. They went 49, 22, and 11. They won the Central Division, and Langenbrunner, he was basically veteran reinforcement for a club that was learning how to win. He played 70 games, scored 6 goals with 18 assists, and finished +7. So his Blues career was short. Only 74 games, but he brought an enormous amount of hockey experience into that room. And sometimes the value of an older player isn't really how many goals did he score. It's what does a 2-time Stanley Cup champion know that the 23-year-old sitting next to him doesn't. Now we move on to Golden State. Yeah, Steve Harris. Not that Steve Harris. No bass guitar, no Iron Maiden, nobody's telling us to run to the hills. Although, considering the 1987-88 Warriors finished 20-62, maybe running to the hills may have been a perfectly reasonable response. This Steve Harris, the one we're talking about, was a 6'5" shooting guard out of Tulsa. He was taken 19th overall by Houston in the 1985 NBA draft, and in December of '87, he came to Golden State. He arrived with Ralph Sampson in that gigantic trade that sent Sleepy Floyd and Joe Barry Carroll back to Houston. And Harris actually played pretty well for Golden State. He appeared in 44 games, started 16, and averaged 10.3 points per game. That's the highest scoring average he had with any team. It wasn't some great Warrior season either. It wasn't a playoff run. It wasn't Run TMC. It wasn't We Believe. It wasn't the Dynasty. But it's a fascinating little transitional period in Warriors history because things were moving. Don Nelson arrived in the organization. Chris Mullin was starting to emerge. And in a couple years, Golden State basketball is about to become something completely different. Steve Harris was just passing through while the furniture was getting rearranged. Finally, Carolina. Nate Chandler might be my favorite story of these 4 because the Panthers basically looked at this enormous defensive lineman and said, what if we put you on offense? So Chandler was undrafted out of UCLA in 2012 and made the Panthers as a defensive tackle. He played 10 games on defense as a rookie. Then Carolina moved into offensive tackle, and that alone, that's a little crazy to me. Think about how specialized the NFL is now. You spend your entire life learning how to defeat blocks, how to get into the backfield, attack an offensive lineman, and suddenly somebody hands you the opposite job. Now you're the blocker. Chandler made it work. In 2013, injuries forced him into the lineup, and he ended up starting 8 games, 6 times at right guard and twice at right tackle. Then he started the first 11 games of 2014 at right tackle before a knee injury took him out. He finished his Carolina Panthers career with 37 games, 19 of them were starts. That's not somebody switching positions for training camp then disappearing. That's somebody switching sides of the football and continuing to be an NFL starter. I love players like that. So that's the 4 for August 15th, 2026. Jerry DaVanon got the best of his opportunity in Houston with the majors. Jamie Langenbrunner brought championship experience to a Blues team that was becoming more of a contender. Steve Harris, basketball player, not Iron Maiden bassist, having his best NBA scoring stretch with Golden State. And Nate Chandler somehow going from trying to beat offensive linemen to becoming one. 4 more pieces of 4 completely different histories. I'll change the wallpaper again tomorrow. And I'm Kevin. Thanks for stopping by. Thanks for sticking around. I hope you check another one out. You have a good day.